evening. I call to order this October 26th meeting of the Winston-Salem City Council and ask the City Secretary to call the roll, please.
Councilmember Light.
Here.
Councilmember Clark.
Here.
Councilmember Fessy. Councilmember Montgomery. Councilmember Burke.
Here.
Councilmember Adams.
Here.
Councilmember McIntosh. And Councilmember Taylor.
Present. Thank you. Would you please join the City Council and me in a moment of silence? Thank you. And would you join the City Council and me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Recognize our Sergeant at Arms tonight, Lieutenant Krista Long. Lieutenant, thank you for being with us tonight. May we have the first item?
Recognition of Council Member Molly Light, recipient of the Grady Hunter Regional Excellence Award from the Piedmont Triad Regional Council.
Thank you. We're so proud of Councilmember Light. Was honored last week with the Grady J. Hunter Award, named after Mr. Grady Hunter, who is a longtime member of the board. It's presented to current board members who demonstrate dedication and service to the region. With Councilmember Light's many years of service in local government and as well as attendance at the PTRC meetings and activities, she was recognized last week. And Councilmember Burke was there, so I'm going to ask Councilmember Burke to make a comment, please.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council, and all of us assembled here. It was a most delightful and pleasant meeting. And to have one of our colleagues to stand out for her service and her commitment, it made all of us there feel very, very good.
Thank you.
Mayor, you asked me to say this. You didn't. I was going to say it anyway.
You didn't say it anyway.
But I want to say this. This is the time when women are saying that we are good leaders. And as you know, I have emphasized women moving forward from the day that I became a member of this council, and also with diversity. So, Ms. Light, Councilwoman Light, you made us feel good.
Thank you.
And I would be remiss if I did not mention something about Councilwoman Adams. We had the North Carolina League of Municipalities conference here a few weeks ago. And we were very pleased as members of this council and the mayor to say how proud we are of you. She will now serve on the North Carolina League board. And I should say that the president, Hutchins, who is our president, a woman from Elkin, North Carolina, when my table I was sitting wanted to introduce her to me, she says, Mrs. Burke is my mentor. I learned a lot from her. And I want you to know women must move forward no matter what age you are or no matter what race you are. Women can no longer step back. We must step forward. So again, to these two fine women, we thank you for stepping forward. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Councilmember Light, would you like to say a word about the award?
Oh, just not. I was totally surprised until one of my sisters opened her big mouth and gave it away. But certainly, the Piedmont Triad Regional Council is an extraordinary group to work with. They have. They do so many things, and it's behind the scenes, so we don't hear about it. So it's been a pleasure to work with them.
Councilmember Adams?
Thank you, Mayor. Again, on behalf of, thank you, my colleagues, and across the state of North Carolina. For those of you that don't know, the North Carolina League of Municipalities is much like a, I won't say lobbyist type group, but that might be what they're also identified as. But their main focus is to look after the interests of municipalities across the state, big or small. This past year was the most successful year the league has had in the past, I'll say, they said 5 to 8 years. And it's based on the fact that we are under new leadership. Paul Myers, our executive director, but the league represents all of you and the interests of the citizens of North Carolina, whether that's the historical tax credits, the film credits, anything else that we do, whether it's the privilege tax, the sales tax. We have people working on our behalf, and all of us, this board sits together and we work together to do what's good and what's best for North Carolina. Again, just want to thank each and every one of you, and I'll be working on behalf of not just the city of Winston-Salem, but the citizens of North Carolina as well.
Good, thank you very much. Congratulations to both of you. Tonight's agenda, the City Council is comprised of two parts, the general agenda and the consent agenda, and it's always the practice of this council to take the consent agenda first. Items on this agenda have been unanimously recommended by a committee of the City Council or are being submitted in accordance with established city procedure. There'll be no discussion of the items unless a council member so requests, at which time we'll pull that item from the consent agenda and consider it individually. Items not removed from the consent agenda will be enacted with one motion. We're televising this meeting live tonight on TV 13, and it will be replayed tomorrow at 9 a.m. and again Wednesday at 9 p.m. Of course, copies of our agenda and videos of our meetings are always available to the public online at the city's website, www.cityofws.org, and just simply click on the Watch City Council Meetings Online option. Council members, are there any items, before we go, I know we want to pull item C10 that staff has a question or a statement about that. Are there other items?
C2.
C2.
C17.
C17. May I have a balance, motion on the balance?
So moved, Mayor.
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? That's unanimous. We'll go to item C2 first.
Item C2, resolution modifying and continuing City of Winston-Salem Economic Development Program Financial Assistance Guidelines, recommended by the Finance Committee.
Councilmember Montgomery.
Yes, I will want the, if staff would be so kind as to please elaborate exactly on what's taking place, what's changing within this actual policy.
Mr. Page.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. And as to your question, Councilman Montgomery, every few years we review the economic development guidelines to determine if they're appropriate based upon council's direction and guidance at that time. We have completed our most recent review of those guidelines and making four recommended changes to those guidelines based upon council direction. Those four changes are to reduce the minimum investment for existing businesses from $1.5 to $1 million, to reduce the minimum job creation requirement for existing businesses from 20 to 15 jobs created or retained within 36 months, to increase the average starting wage from $10 per hour to $10.48 per hour, which is the current living wage for a single person living in Forsyth County. And the last one, except in unusual circumstances as determined by City Council, businesses will be required to comply with a 10% community development employment allowance, which requires the businesses to employ qualified low to moderate income individuals that live in the neighborhood revitalization strategy area or other low to moderate income persons living outside the NRSA with similar barriers to employment or persons with employment barriers such as a criminal record. In those unusual circumstances, City Council may provide a bonus incentive payment of up to 10% to aid the businesses in trying to achieve the 10% community development employment allowance.
Wanted just for public understanding to understand exactly what this policy change does. As it was discussed in Finance Committee, the minimum that's put here is a step in the right direction. We want to challenge individuals about living wages, but living wages are one thing, but are people able to thrive on that is a whole nother discussion. But I think what we're doing in this act is one that challenges anybody who comes knocking on the door of the city to do more when it comes to the employment of hiring individuals locally, as well as hiring individuals in our community who have some challenges and those who need the work the most. And so I'm happy we're walking in this direction, looking forward to more that we're able to do.
Yeah, make a motion.
Move for approval.
Second.
Councilmember Bessie had a question.
Since the term has come up as a public education matter, folks are familiar with the term minimum wage, the lowest wage per hour that you can pay under the law. Can you define the term living wage and explain how it's calculated?
Living wage is actually a wage that's determined by the MSA that you live in. It is that wage which you would be able to receive and still be able to meet all your daily needs, your rent, your daily expenses, your food, your insurance. I think in Forsyth County it's around $15 per hour. Somebody else may know closer, but I think it's around $15 per hour in Forsyth County.
And so that's an economic term as opposed to a legal term, and MSA in the context metropolitan statistical area,
Yes.
or the region in which Forsyth County is located. Thank you.
Councilmember Burke?
Yes, Mayor, members of the council, in the Finance Committee meeting, I did make a comment. It may, as the council person said, it is a step forward.
Right.
But as I said in the meeting, it is nothing really to brag about. How many people can live on $10.48? Nobody. But they're living on those kinds of wages. And we will not be satisfied, I believe, in this country until the leadership of people will move forward and overall say in this city, as well as other cities around this country, a $10.48, and even if it's a $15, when people are trained, they cannot live successfully. And I'm going to say what I said in that meeting. It's a shame and a disgrace. It's nothing to brag on. It is a step forward. Thank you.
Very good. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. That is unanimous. Item C10.
Item C10, ordinance amending section 42-124F of the city code related to school zones.
Council members, without objection, staff has asked we send that back to the Public Safety Committee. Mr. Taylor, without objection. All right, thank you. Item C17.
Item C17, ordinance amending Chapter 2 of the City Code entitled Administration, establishing a Community Agency Allocation Committee, recommended by the Finance Committee.
Councilmember Taylor.
Thank you, Mayor. Members of the council, I think we would all agree that we have some really good agencies in the city of Winston-Salem who do some really good work. Some of those agencies are well-known. Some of those agencies are not so well-known. But my original concern with the grantee agency process was that you kind of have the same people at the table every single year when it comes to the grantee agency funding for the city of Winston-Salem. I think that it is a step forward considering establishing the Community Agency Allocation Committee, but I think that we have a prime opportunity to put just a little bit more in place to ensure that the circle is rotating and that all the nonprofit agencies are getting the opportunity to be at the table instead of just the same few every single year. What I'd suggest at this time, I know this is a little bit time sensitive, but I suggest that we send this back to committee just for a little bit further discussion. I know that there are council members who are in favor of this committee, and I'm in favor of it as well, but I think we've got a really good opportunity to add some teeth and some responsibility, to add some equity and fairness to how we distribute those funds, and I'd ask that I have maybe another month to look at it so that we can move forward with the process.
So is your motion to
send it back to the committee, the next finance committee, and then we'll bring it right back to the full council
Is there a
shortly
second
after.
to that motion?
Second.
Second, okay. Councilmember Adams had a comment? Or?
Yes, I'm one of those council members that's a proponent of this. As a matter of fact, I started talking about this needed process when I was elected in 2009. Just as we have a budget review and advisory commission and other commissions here in the city, whether it's MWBE or anything else, I felt like the city needed to have an allocations committee of citizens and others to review our process as to how we allocate the funds. As we all know, the budget, when it comes, the one thing that most people are concerned about is the allocation of community development block grant and or the city side of the budget that gives to nonprofits. I felt like if there are other agencies that I've worked on their allocation commissions and panels, whether it was the United Way, whether it was the Arts Council, whether it was Smart Start, I think it's a good idea and it's a good direction for us to go in. Again, last year we made some tweaks to the process that more communication was done to give notice to all of the nonprofits and anyone that wanted to seek monies and funds from the city of Winston-Salem. It worked pretty good. We got a big turnout, and I foresee we're going to have another big turnout, Mr. Manor, when we do it in, a couple of weeks or next week. But what I'm asking council to is consider, as we all do, it's a plan, it's a process. We're working to make it better. We realize that some of our bigger nonprofits, they're not really nonprofits. They are in their status, but they make a lot of money, tax dollars, for the city of Winston-Salem, whether that's Old Salem, whether that's the Arts Council. And yes, we've kind of done some tweaking there so that the little agencies will have an opportunity. But I feel with council recommending the people to sit on this allocation panel and being able to review the process as it still continues to move forward, I am a proponent of this, and I will be voting for this.
All right, so we do have a motion on the floor. Okay, Councilman Clark.
Mr. Page, is this your area?
No, I think it's Mr. Myers.
Our budget director.
The budget.
Oh, my question, is there a time sensitivity to this as far as the cycle? Because we're talking about pushing it back to a month.
Good afternoon, Mayor Jones, members of council. There is a time sensitivity, but last year I think we began a little bit later than even a month, so we can manage if necessary.
Okay.
That's what council.
So this
chooses to
delay
do.
will not impact the work of the committee?
If it's basically pending nomination, so
Okay.
we should be able to manage.
Okay, and the second comment I was going to make, at least incorporated in the current plan, is each ward will nominate someone. So for my fellow council folks, we need to give some thought as to who we need to give the name to the mayor.
Right, and I would just say, if we do send it back, I would just encourage everybody to get their names in as quick as possible so we can get it in place and go forward. All right, the motion is to send this back to the Finance Committee for review in the meeting in November and come back here. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no.
No.
I have 2 noes and 5 yeses, so it goes back to Finance Committee. Thank you. All right, we'll now go back to the general agenda, which is comprised of the following. We have 2 street closing petitions. There's an item designating certain property as a historic landmark, as well as our public comment period. The street closing petitions and the historic landmark item are public hearings, and when these items are called, persons in the council chamber will be given an opportunity to speak. If no one wishes to speak, the public hearings will be closed and the city council will consider the item. May we have the first item, please?
Item G1, public hearing and resolution ordering the closing of a portion of North Chestnut Street located south off of Martin Luther King Jr. Drive in the East Ward. Petition of Goler Community Development Corporation, recommended by the Public Works Committee.
Is there anyone in the council chamber who is opposed to this street closing? I know the petitioner is here if there are any questions. All right, seeing no one, I'll declare the public hearing closed, and I'd recognize Councilmember Montgomery.
I'd like to make a motion then a comment.
All right, please.
I move for approval.
Second.
Wait a second. Go ahead.
Just a comment that this road closure is in conjunction with development that is taking place that's being led by Goler Community Development Corporation. And this development is one that I think our community continues to be excited about, but will be even more excited when it actually is built and the doors are open, because that will introduce the first project we'll have truly in downtown Winston-Salem that will offer workforce housing units in downtown. And happy that the CDC was able to put together a plan to be able to bring that into the community where we're diversifying the opportunities for housing in our community.
Wonderful. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. That's unanimous. Item 2.
Item G2, public hearing and resolution ordering the closing of a portion of North Liberty Street located east off of Martin Luther King Jr. Drive in the East Ward. Petition of William L. Spencer, recommended by the Public Works Committee.
Again, is there anyone, Council Chairman, who is opposed to this street closing? I know Mr. Spencer is here if there are any questions. All right, so seeing no one, I'll declare the public hearing closed, and again, recognize Councilmember Montgomery.
Motion and comment again. Move for approval.
Second.
Please go ahead.
And again, on this, again, would like to thank Mr. Spencer and others for their investment in our community. This is yet another opportunity for us as we see individuals making investment and opportunity for expansion in our community. And so, again, look forward to what will be taking place on this site.
Very good. All right, all in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. That's unanimous. Thank you. Oh, excuse me, Councilmember Bessie.
Just one observation, in case anybody following the meeting missed it. These are right-of-way closures, and they're paper streets. They're not actually open, used streets. So that's why they're so straightforward.
Can't drive on them today. Thank you very much.
Put productive use.
That's right. Thank you. All right, item 3.
Item G3, public hearing on ordinance designating certain property as a historic landmark, Thurman and Lucy Haynes Chatham House, 112 South Stratford Road. The Finance Committee forwarded this item with 3 in favor, none opposed, and 1 abstaining. Recommended by Community Development, Housing General Government Committee.
Before we do the public hearing, I'll ask Michelle McCullough just to give us a brief report on the recommendation of the Historic Properties Commission.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, City Council. Give me 1 second. Alrighty, this evening, this is a local historic landmark application. This is the public hearing for that. And again, our landmark program, we have over 130 of them. These are the properties that receive up to a 50% tax deferral, but must follow the guidelines for local historic landmarks, so they have that criteria attached to them. The Thurman and Lucy Haynes Chatham House is located at 112 North Stratford Road in Winston-Salem. There's the map, and I am not on full screen. I apologize. There you go. There's the map. It's located right close to the area called 5 Points. Most of us are familiar with that over there by the Thruway Shopping Center too. This is a picture of the Thurman and Lucy Haynes Chatham House from the front. It was designed by Keene and Wallace, Charles Barton Keene being the Keene in that group, built in 1923. It was one of the 4 imposing 1920s dwellings built in the Stratford Place subdivision. The Philadelphia landscape architect Thomas Sears designed the landscape for these houses, and 3 out of the 4 houses were lived in by Chatham's or Haynes family members. The style is unique for Winston-Salem because it's a departure from the other large European country house styles, where this one incorporated a lot of French designs, and this is really the only one we have in the French design style. Again, for the architectural significance, the outside, it's because of this French design, and it's large, but it's reserved and sophisticated and shows just subtleties of the wealth and stature. The significance of the interior is pretty much the same way, but they also tried to connect the interior with the exterior, always creating a feeling of nature inside. So those are it is being designated under criteria C for its architecture. The State Historic Preservation Office gave us their word that we have enough information to make a decision, and they felt it did meet the criteria. On August 5th, the Historic Resource Commission met and held their public hearing and voted unanimously to recommend it to City Council for approval. So in conclusion, the Historic Resource Commission recommends the designation of the complete exterior, interior of the Thurman and Lucy Haynes Chatham House and the block and lots upon which it sits, and their numbers are included up there. Again, just briefly, some photos of the front, moving around to the rear of the home and the interiors. Just a couple of photos for you in the garage.
Any questions of Ms. McCullough? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
This is a public hearing. I had one person signed up, and I'm having a little difficulty with the last name. It's Gillardville. Okay. Anyone else like to be heard on this matter? All right, seeing no one, I'll declare the public hearing closed. What's the pleasure of the
Move approval.
Second.
motion and second? Councilmember Montgomery?
Yes, I was the one who abstained on this item in Finance Committee, and I will voice the reason again today on why I abstained from voting, on the item at that time. And my colleagues know that when items like this, in terms of historic landmark, come before council, I ask questions, particularly in terms of the greater benefit of community. And beyond, we know we are able to retain these properties in the community and have the historic nature of them being retained and understanding the historical nature of what it means to our community. But I'm often challenged when these properties are used for single family, continued use for single family, because then the benefit in how I see oftentimes is only given to the individuals who are occupying the property. And there's nothing against those who have taken their time and their money to purchase the property and to invest in the property. I say kudos to you for that, and you're able to maintain something that will have great historic character to our community. But unfortunately, I'm not able to support this item tonight. We've had other projects in our community where we've had the historic landmark status that has been designated on them, and they've been adaptive reuses where we've seen large amounts of money invested in those properties and the greater public benefits from all that's happening there. Chatham Mills project to even the Reynolds building, both of those local historic landmark status that the greater community will see that from. Individuals aren't able to come up to the house, take a tour, or do those items within the property, so I'm challenged on how we're able to give the tax benefit to a single individual rather than seeing the whole community benefit from that. And for that reason, and no reason against the owners or the historic nature of the property, I'm not going to be able to support it tonight.
All right. Councilmember Adams.
Yes, I think the record can be reviewed to show that I've questioned this for the past 6 years. Again, nothing personal against the individuals that want to come and do this. I supported it in committee, but again, I am challenged also because I know everyone says, well, you don't understand how financially, how expensive it is to keep these properties up. Well, I think when the individual decides that that's where they want to move, just like anybody else that moves in a house, with it comes financial responsibility to keep the house up, whether it's a roof or windows. Now, whether your windows are the kind I can buy at Lowe's, or whether your windows are the kind you got to send off somewhere and wait 3 or 4 months for them to come, I still believe that it's incumbent upon the owner of the house to handle that responsibility. Again, it is nothing personal against the people who want to live in these type buildings, but you have to understand, just as the state decided to reconfigure the historical tax credits, cities are going to have to start looking at how we do this as well. I feel as though, again, I've said if there was a tour being taken place like at Old Salem, if there was something that people could go look at and take some pictures, maybe drop a few coins in a bucket and it comes back to the city, I'm okay with that. But you have to understand that everybody can't continue when people's houses lost value over the last appreciation and things. They can't see the benefit of this because it doesn't benefit the community as a whole. Again, it's not like people are going to be driving by on a bus and be able to look at it. It's not that kind of thing. So I too, again, it's nothing personal. I won't be supporting this as well.
Councilmember Bessie.
I think my colleagues have raised a valid question, and I think it deserves an answer. I think there are answers, several, in fact. A couple I'd point to. One is I think we need to look at the longer term than simply the immediate use of a structure. Historic structure is a long-term asset to the community, particularly ones that meet the high criteria for eligibility for designation as a landmark status. Once you lose a historic structure, you can't get it back ever. So we have a resource for the community as a whole by retaining these over time. A structure that is a single-family use building today may well become a direct access by the public asset at some future point. And if you lose it today, that possibility is permanently foreclosed. Secondly, structures are visible and they are a part of the neighborhood and the community in which they sit. A good historic structure maintained in good condition, as expensive as that may be, becomes an asset to the community around it, enhancing the property values around it. Those enhanced property values directly benefit the taxpayers of the city. I think that while it is a valid question that my colleagues have raised. There are valid answers to that challenge, and I think this is an example that we should all support. And I would just note as a side point that there isn't anybody on the council who is more aggressive in pursuit of the interests of the average person economically than I am. You know, sometimes it gets to be a joke on council. So this isn't a matter of sort of wealthy elites versus everybody else. This is a matter in which someone who is very definitively not economically a member or socially a member of the wealthy elite sees the community value in protecting our historic assets like this.
Good. Councilmember Burke?
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Throughout the years, I have supported projects like this. I agree with the council person. The long run, we will see something good from this. When we talk about this city growing and the things that we're doing, we do have things that will attract people. And one thing that I see when people ride through, they may not get off the bus, but some of them do get off the bus, out of a car, and they'll take pictures of certain places. So as I said in the Finance Committee meeting, I supported this project. And as a member of the TDA, I will continue to support projects that will enhance tourism and make people interested in wanting to come visit our city. Even though this is a historical piece of property, there's a lot of investment in this property. And I think when you look at a city, it adds to the history, and it continues the history. So I will be supporting this.
Councilman Adams, please.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. When we come from the place of protecting historical properties and the history of this city, we all know that the only place that is protected is in certain affluent neighborhoods, basically. You got Ardmore, you got Oakcrest, you got a few of the working class neighborhoods, but the reality is some of the things that we've been doing, we can't continue to keep doing them the way we do them. You know, and again, I know that this project will pass, but it won't pass with my name on it because I said years ago, I know we have over 130 of these properties, and I find it very hard to believe that, unfortunately, you know, nobody wants to do the monetary investment in the poor urban or other neighborhoods so they can get some tax credits, but, you know, maybe their property isn't valued enough. Again, you can't keep saving and protecting the history, and then it does go down to economics of who can afford to save history versus those communities that can't, and hence, therefore, we don't really have any history in some of our neighborhoods. So again, Mayor and Council and the general public, I commend the persons that can afford to do this, but I just don't think it's right that we allow this when it doesn't benefit more than just a single residential house. I'm not going to support it.
Good. Councilmember Montgomery,
Yeah, that's fine.
I'll come right to you.
And Jess, I know we don't want to debate this to death, but this is going to pass tonight for those who are sitting here tonight. But just the concept for us to understand what we're looking at, and even the larger picture of the implications of what we're looking at. I think my colleague Councilman Bessie, much of what he said I agree with in how we preserve history, but when we look at it, there are a couple things that we see in these type of projects, and particularly those that I support are those that oftentimes the investment is so great in the property that even with the 50% tax reduction, we still receive more in taxes because of the amount of money that's been put into it, that we receive more than what we get back because the property is still worth more than what it was with the 50% tax break. And then on the other side of that, when we look at oftentimes the neighborhoods that these properties exist in, the thought that, you know, everybody has the opportunity to go out and to enjoy some of the historical pieces of this. The fact of the matter is, and we can argue whether or not we believe it to be true or not, but if I took a group of young kids out of the neighborhood that I live in right now, we began to walk down the street and stood in front of these houses and began to take pictures, we probably get police called on us. And that's the truth that we don't oftentimes want to deal with, but that's the reality. And so if we're all going to enjoy it, we have to deal with the broader picture of what all is going to be done with what we're doing. So we have to understand both sides of that coin.
Councilmember Clark?
First of all, I actually think it was Councilman Montgomery asked for a listing of all the properties. I think that would be very helpful, number one. Number two, to the best of my knowledge, this is only the second house in the West Ward. And I think when you get that list, you're going to be surprised where most of the historic properties are. I know a lot of them in your ward with Old Salem. I think Ardmore's got a fair number, but they're scattered out. But again, this is, and the other one is just 2 doors down from this. And a third comment, I was approached about 4 years ago by someone who wanted to tear this house down and put up something different. It was in my opinion, quite disrepair, and I congratulate the folks that purchased it. And I do think, rightly or wrongly, and I will say I don't always vote for these either. I didn't vote for the one that's 2 doors down. In this particular case, having toured it, it is going to take a lot of money to maintain this property in the style that they wanted to maintain.
Councilman Burke?
Mayor, members of the council, when I came here, the East Ward had some of the most historical houses. 14th Street, Cameron, and some parts where the college, Winston-Salem State, is located. We wish we could go back because our hearts ache because we do not have what Councilwoman Adams would love for us to have. She may not remember herself being younger growing up, but those homes were very stately, beautiful. We looked up to it. The federal government, HUD, came through, revitalization came through, and they tore those beautiful homes down. If you look at Crystal Tower today, quite a few of those homes look just like Crystal Tower. You remember the beautiful homes. My heart aches when I think of my history, of what has happened to my history, and how it was so easy for people on one side of town to make major decisions for people on another side of town. I wish we could go back. I will not be living when some of the houses where I live may one day be a historical house, because we do have some lovely homes, some very beautiful homes east of 52. Some of you don't know because you've never ridden out to see the other side of town. I said to the city manager the other day, I said, you have staff. They don't even know where we live. You have staff. They don't know how we struggle to have those lovely homes, even though the tax value of them have gone down. And I say it's a shame that we provide salaries and opportunities for these city employees, and they take my area for granted. They take my area for granted. And he said, well, maybe what I should do, let's put us on a bus and ride out and see the area. And maybe they can become more sensitive to the struggles that my people made in order to be where I am today. Councilmember Adams and Councilmember Montgomery, and I'm voting for this, but my heart still aches on how some could have been right there east of 52, down 14th Street, down Cameron Avenue, and in the area where Winston-Salem State University sits.
Councilmember Taylor?
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. You know, I always like to lead off by saying I'm born and reared in this city, and I always think it's important to preserve our history. I understand the value of the Chatham House. I also understand the value of preserving the George Black Brickyard. But as long as we have a landmark designation program, we have to figure out what we're going to do. You know, are we going to cherry pick houses as they come up who meet the criteria, or are we not going to do it? You know, I think that as the General Assembly starts to pass legislation that makes us tighten our belt, we all know we've lost millions of dollars in revenue. We do have to rethink how we do things. But are we going to continue to use this as a tool to promote historic preservation or not. And that's what I'm torn between. Now, I understand both arguments, but nevertheless, the tool is still in place. So from a policy perspective, what will we do as a council? Will we shortstop and cherry pick everyone that comes out? Will we say, we're only going to support those who are not single family, we're going to support those for the public good? Whatever it is, we do need to find some kind of criteria and stick to it. Those are my thoughts about it.
We have a motion to approve the historic designation of this house. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no.
No.
I'm hearing 2 noes, Councilmember Adams, Councilmember Montgomery. All right, motion passes.
Mayor,
Yes.
since this is an ordinance, you
Come
will
back.
need a second reading.
All right, we'll take a second reading because we only had 5 votes. We'll come back at the next meeting. Thank you very much. All right, then we'll now go to the public comment period. This is a time once per month where the City Council invites members of the public to address it on matters that are germane to city government. We'd ask individuals who would like to speak to come forward and give your name and address for the record and limit your comments to 3 minutes. First person signed up is Mr. Mike Dickinson.
I'd like these given out to staff. All right. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
I'm glad to be here finally to be able to address some of the injustices that I've
Would you
encountered.
state your name and address for the record, please?
It's Mike Dickinson. My place of business is 515 North Cherry Street. That's the Lollipops Adult Club. And I've been here in Winston-Salem since about September 1st. And since I've been here, I've been the target of police harassment that I believe is racially biased, and that the police are using their power to try to generate calls on my business and make me out to be a nuisance because I cater to a clientele that is predominantly African American and that brings young African Americans downtown into an area of the city that I don't think my neighbors want me to have young African American customers. Since I've been here, I've had 4 police incidents. There were a few more last week, but what you're getting is the data through last week. I've had 4 incidents. 3 were complete garbage. The police coming by to do nothing more than to generate reports to make my place out to look like a nuisance. Because ultimately, that's how this nuisance law works. If the police generate a lot of calls for service, they can deem you a nuisance, and then the city can use some kind of a perverted eminent domain to shut you down and seize your property and kick you out. So the police are coming by and doing nothing more than to generate reports that make me look like a nuisance. How do I get that it's racial from? Well, look at the data in front of you. I pulled these, and there's also a couple of copies of the actual police reports from other bars in town. I've had 4 incidents since September 1st. There's lots of other bars and restaurants that cater to a predominantly white college crowd, and they're not deemed public nuisances. Look what happened this past weekend. I believe ALE and the local law enforcement raided a couple adult clubs, 155 charges. I want to see all those 3 clubs deemed nuisances. To be fair, they should all be deemed public nuisances as well. If you're going to call my club a nuisance with my 4 calls, and if you look back at the data for the last few years, it doesn't even add up to 155. So the city should get to work and deem these 3 other clubs nuisances if you're going to call me a nuisance. It comes down to, I've got 30 seconds left and I'll make it short. There's certain people and certain players in the city that don't want my club where it is. I've seen some of the quotes in the newspaper from neighbors lamenting and this and that. Well, you knew a club was there when you moved. You shouldn't have moved there. If you move next to a fire station, don't complain about the sirens. You chose to live in an urban city, and now you can't go back. Just like you said, Councilwoman Adams, homeowner responsibility. If you choose to move to a city next to a club, you're responsible. And that's all I have for this week. I'll see you guys in about 2 weeks with more of my complaints.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Joanne Allen.
Good evening. Joanne Allen, P.O. Box 284, Winston-Salem 27102. First of all, I don't know whether to shake my head or what, because every time I come to this meeting, I don't know if you all live in Winston-Salem or not, but what I'm seeing is this, is the fact that every last one of you all sit up here, and I have to say it again, and you all have heard it many times, we have 8 Democrats sitting on this, council. 8 Democrats and 1 Republican, okay? And the problem is this. The problem is that everything that you all talk about, especially tonight, we're talking about how East Winston look and how the houses look on the other side, on the west side, and everything like that. Guess what? The reason things are the way they are is because of you all. I'm talking about the present council, and I'm talking about the previous councils. It is your responsibility, once again, to do what you need to do. Ms. Burke, you talked about women. Let me just share this with you very quickly. Last year when I came before the council, I talked about the fact that Winston-Salem is ranked number 2 in the country, not the state, but the country, for having more poor people living in poverty. Just last week, another study came out from right here, the Women's Fund, that once again talked about women. There are more women in poverty here in Forsyth County. The number for the white women have doubled. The number for the black women have doubled, and well, not quite, but almost, as well as the Hispanics. But yet and still, I don't hear you all talking about what you all are going to do and what you all would like to do. What I hear is about allocation of money to these nonprofit organizations. So if you really want to know exactly what's going on here in Winston-Salem and how we got here, I have to look at every last one of you all, and especially the ones who have been with the city for almost 40 or more years. Thank you very much.
Philip Johnson.
Philip Johnson, T. Johnson Sons Property Management, 920 West 5th Street. I was coming today because of Mr. Dickinson's complaints. One of our residents at the village lofts adjacent to his club was unable to attend. We're her landlord. She asked us to read this letter. To whom it may concern, upon reading the article in today's journal, I want to add some clarification to Mr. Dickinson's concerns that the police responded to a random call regarding the noise level at Lollipops. I'm a resident in the village lofts located at 511 North Cherry Street. Every night the club is open. I'm able to hear their music until the wee hours of the morning. Some nights I have chosen to overlook it. Some nights the noise from my sound machine and the fan on the stove can almost make it bearable. However, on October 17th at approximately 3:20, I caved in and called the police. I need to be at work the next day and could not sleep. I have spoken to other residents of the building and also said that the volume of the music, most probably the bass, has woken them up throughout the night. I'm willing to solicit my neighbors to sign a petition if needed. I believe in Mr. Dickinson's right to own a profitable business. I assure you this is not about race or the nature of his business. This is purely a quality of life issue, and I may need my sleep. Thank you for listening to my concern, an anonymous resident at the Village Lofts. Also had an email from Mass Store, who was also unable to attend this evening. Their concerns were the following issues they've had with the occupants. Is we've had to look at piles of trash, old furniture, and junk that was piled several feet outside of their entrance, as well as an unkempt and junky landscape. There have been 3 occasions where the female staff have left work at night and been harassed and yelled at by patrons or employees of the establishment. We witnessed sex acts being performed in broad daylight in the alleyway. Many mornings there have been beer cans, liquor bottles left in the property entrance, as well as used condoms left in the alley. And generally, the establishment is an eyesore and does not contribute to the downtown community. Please let me know if I can be of further assistance. Zach Leal, General Manager of the Mass General Store. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thurman Phillips.
Hello. My name is Thurman Phillips. I live at 813 Cranford Street in Easton. And I've lived there for 50 plus years. I built my home. I raised a family there, went to church and schools there. One of my sons went to state championship in sports, and the other son went to 3 colleges and graduated. And I've had a good life at this area, this neighborhood. And like I say, I bought some property behind my home, and that's my problem right there. I'm having problems with the city about my home that I have there. I've never lived in the home. I didn't buy the home to live in. I bought it to store things and put things. I needed more room. And my house went down a little bit. And I have worked on it over the years. 37 years I've owned this house and worked on it. Never lived in it. Tried to put things there that I saved. I'm a collector. And I like to collect things. And it takes room to do that, you know. And the city wants to turn my house down. It does need some work, I admit. In fact, the city gave me a chance to do the work on it and get it where they'd be happy with it. But I'm an old man. I'm 80 years old. I will be in March. And I need the city to help me a little bit. If they want me to finish my house up, I need some help. I need to hire some help to do some of my work that I need done. And that's all I need. I need some help from the city if I'm going to complete my house. And I will. I don't want to tear the house down, but if it's necessary, I'll have to, you know. But I'll be happy to finish the house, but I do need some help. And thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Mr. Brooks is here, or he was here, but if we can get Mr. Brooks with Ms. Phillips, maybe we can talk with any options might be available for you, Ms.
I can't
Phillips.
hear you, sir.
I'm sorry. We'll have staff contact you and see if there's any way we can work with
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Councilmember Taylor, this is
Yeah,
your
thank
board.
you. Mr. Phillips, well, this house is in Easton in the southeast one, and we've talked on the phone. Mr. Brooks is aware of your concerns, and we're all working to address it. So we'll continue to have this conversation offline.
If I can avoid tearing my house down, I would like that. I would like to finish my house, but I'm not able. I've had 3 heart attacks, and 1 aneurysm, 1 heart bypass, and several stents. And so I just can't do all this, but I do some work.
Right.
We'll do our best to work with you.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips.
I would like to do the things that I could do on my house, but some things I can't do.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, is anyone else who would like to speak during our public comment period? Yes, sir, Mr. Carter.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Madam Pro Temp, distinguished city councilman. Good evening. Philip Carter, 1148 5th Street. I've enjoyed the conversation and the meeting this evening, but what I wanted to speak to was, since we were talking about historical landmarks, and you've made mention that so many of ours are gone, but I'm concerned about the 2 houses that are on Humphrey Street, and I have it on my phone. You may know what I'm talking about. Maybe Mr. Turner can help me with this. Maybe he can help me. You'll know the houses that I'm talking about. And I don't know whether you all have a plan for them or not. I do not know. I'm not saying you don't. But you know those houses back there on Humphrey, the shotgun houses. Those, they are historical. And they're sitting on property. It was once property that we know that Africans who were residents of Salem College had been fortunate enough to move across the creek. So I just hope, I don't know that you do or you don't. I'm not arguing with you or fighting at you. I just hope we can find a way to save these houses. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. Oh, excuse me.
Yes,
Councilman Adams.
Mr. Carter, you will know that there's a plan working. Trust me.
Thank you.
I am assisting some party to work. It's a group of us. So, and the group is a group that's going to get some things done. So we're working. They won't go away.
Thank you.
We're going to protect them.
Thank you. Anyone else like to be heard? Yes.
hate speaking in public. Robert Delaware, I live at 233A West 5th Street, an historical building. And I would like to answer the question about lollipops. I have written all of you about it. I wish to say that when one is awakened at 3 or 3:30 or 4 or 4:30 in the morning by loud noises, fighting, nonsense that is not right, and you don't know whether it's black, white, or any other color, it's noise, and it's all coming from lollipops. I protest. Why should we be awakened at 3 or 3:30 or 4 in the morning by all of this noise, whether they're by drunks, whether they're by anybody, any color? It's nonsense. I would request that the city disallow this to continue. We cannot sleep. We are very irritated. It's been going on too long. Simple.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir? Yes. Oh, yeah. I'm sorry.
My name is Takia Stardivant. I live at 3648 Heathrow Lane, but I used to live off of 25th Street. And could I show some pictures? I lived in mold. This type of mold, I couldn't breathe. And this was HUD over in your area.
Would you state your address? Is this on the 25th Street?
No, the 25th Street was 1771 East 25th Street, apartment 1.
And what's your address now?
3648 Heathrow Lane.
Heathrow, okay.
And this was mold. I couldn't breathe. It, my water bill went high. It damaged the whole, like my clothes, my furniture, different things of that nature. And all they did was paint over it. I went to the city inspector, human relations, and nothing happened. And this was like behind the refrigerator, things of that nature. And I have a whole lot. You can see the mold real good in the carpet. Also on my shoes, mold in the windowsill. And mold on paint, how they covered it up and it came back and seeped through the walls, things of that nature. And I have city reports where they said that it was the crawl space barrier was wet, muddy, contributing to moisture level, and detected light fixtures, things of that nature. The mold on my kitchen cabinet. And here's the complaints from the residential complaints and notice of hearing from human relations and city inspector. They did nothing about it. I went through the proper channels and I had to leave my home. I had just had surgery. I couldn't breathe. Ended up losing my job and had to start all over. So now I stay with my parents for now. And in them areas, like they closed down Laurent School due to the fact of the contaminated water and things was going on, dealing with the same problems that I have in that area. And there's no concerns, nothing has been done over there. And I'm speaking for some of the elderly people that lives in there on mold, can't breathe. And I had bad headaches breathing it.
And your request is that the city inspectors did not do an adequate job of inspecting and following through with the homeowner?
Yes, I went through it for a whole year through legal aid Didn't get no kind of satisfaction, no nothing. And all they told me to do was to move out. They gave me a lease termination. I did that. And when I moved out, they ended up trying to sue me. I never owed any rent or anything. I paid all my utilities, my bills, and everything. My water bill went sky high due to the fact of the leaks up under the house, a lot of moisture. Like, I could clean up my house and leave for like a day or so, come back in, you could smell the mold real strong. And they said that they did something about it, but if you going to deal with mold, you have to gut it.
Right.
And they never did none of that.
Thank you, and I think obviously we can have staff follow up with you, and I think Councilmember Burke wants to follow up.
That's what I was going to say. Before she leaves, we need to sit down and get a clear understanding. But also, Mr. Turner, you need to explain about what is happening over there. About the area where we do have that pollution near Haynes School. We're in a process right now. He needs to let you know, and I think the public needs to know what's happening.
Right, we'll have staff get with you before you leave tonight, if you would, and follow up with that.
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. And Mr. Turner, you want to comment on the work there around Haynes Lawrence?
Certainly, Mayor, members of council, the city has been in the process of gathering information from monitoring wells that we had installed in that area to determine what the pollution plume from the industrial sites in that area has been and how it has expanded since the original data that we got, I think, in 2009. We realized that that plume has expanded, and therefore we're getting additional data from new monitoring wells. We did a round 1 test of those wells, found that the plume had extended beyond the area of the round 1 wells, and so we're doing round 2 testing at this point. We're also, at this point, doing some in-house testing at a few properties to determine whether there's any vapor that's coming up from the soil into dwellings, and we'll be continuing that work until we're satisfied that we have an understanding of what the situation is for the residents in that area.
Mayor, members of the council, it was stated clearly that the city manager, in talking with Mr. Turner, the assistant city manager, and his staff, this is something that we're not taking lightly. We have met with the people. We will continue to meet with them. Now, Lawrence School, we know they had their concern. They had someone else looking at that problem. But as the lady indicated, there are a lot of elderly people still in the area around the school. And I said then, I thought it was a shame that we've had this going on, and I don't know how we're going to get out of it. That's what I've been trying to find out. Because these people have been in their homes, some are home ownership, and some are rented. It does not matter where they rent or where they have their own homes. We have a responsibility. I can't say it clear enough. We have a tremendous responsibility, and that is to make sure that these citizens, as the lady indicated, that she's living and sleeping in that mold and mildew, and I don't know if that has anything to do with the pollution we're talking about, but I hope before we leave here this evening, and I will be sitting with you with them, that we will have a better understanding about where you lived and how you lived in that and how long you lived in that. And as far as that other stuff we're talking about, with the area that we're talking about, where we've been meeting with the people, I am not satisfied and pleased. I've said it to the city manager. I am not satisfied that we let the people live. But I want to tell you, the county who was doing the environmental work there, they would come out, even when I worked at Lawrence School, and we complained about Bassick Sack. It is not the same thing, but you also had that fertilizer place. And we continue to complain, but they didn't write it up as a major problem. And I don't want to be indifferent here tonight. I'm like Mr. Carter. I don't want to fuss and carry on. I'm trying to maintain. But I want to say this. When the parents from the Lawrence School start opening up their mouths, you see how they got a shuffling on them? Move the children out of the school. And you know who's in that school. A majority of you know who's in that school. And if it had not been a majority of you know who's in that school, if it had only been a few and they pushed a certain way, they would have moved them out. And Mr. City Manager, we're not happy. And we're not happy in how we see the progress of what's going on. Mr. Turner and I've had our rounds. He knows it. We're not happy. And I want you all to know that it's not a plaything here. It's business we're talking about.
Thank you. Yes, sir. You've been very patient waiting there.
Good evening.
Good evening.
You could show some of these as well. Yusef Suggs resides at 1926 Kentucky Avenue, 27101, non-domicile. Unlike Mr. Carter, Ms. Burke, I am here to make a fuss and fight. Because when you're talking about the seal of Winston-Salem that said Urbs Condita Aduvando, a city with cooperation because it was sister cities, that means there has to be a cooperation with elected officials who have taken oaths to protect the people against mold, like I'm living in right now. Mr. Garrity, I've sent you pictures. You have not got back in contact with me. Mr. Montgomery, I've not only given you information, you've come to my home, you have not gotten back in contact with me. I've been living in this for a year with a landlord who's an attorney, and we're talking about ethics. See, when we're talking about another phrase of Latin, a fros omnis vitiae, it means fraud supersedes everything. And when you take oaths, that means the oaths have to carry upon the people to protect them in their liberty and their property, not to live in mold, not to have inspectors to write them up because they're working in collusion and then tell me that you don't have to go by certain state laws. So anytime a city does not have an ordinance or carries an ordinance that abrogates my state law rights, we have an issue. We have an issue. I've addressed you, Mr. Garrity. I called you. I've left pictures with you. Who wants to live in continuous mold? I have a 12-year-old son who's a scholar at College E. Woodson School, who's a scholar and an athlete, a student athlete, the epitome. And at 5 days upon taking upon contracts, and this is what we're facing right here, where people like this young lady and other people in the city who may get behind or whatever, and they get tied up in contracts and they don't know how to stand up in law. And if they don't have the elected officials and the people to stand up for them, then what do we have? We have a deficiency in this council. When we're talking about AAA credit ratings and we're talking about national unemployment rating of 2%, the people are crying. We're not talking about credit ratings. We want Parks getting better. That's making Parks looking pretty. But the people are poor. This is what the people are crying for. If we're not giving the people the jobs, we have people like myself living in mold, where there's a hole where I've shown you, Mr. Montgomery, that's still there, where there's been a neglect, a willful neglect, a culpable neglect, and we're talking about a possible criminal neglect, because I will be going to the hospital tomorrow to get checked for mold. I've been living it in a year. I've already stated to North Carolina Electrical Board of Contractors of this landlord using unlicensed electricians.
Sir, your time is up. Could you summarize?
Yes, I would like something done ASAP, because if not, then we will have to deal in at all situations. No one has gotten back in contact with me. I've been living in this a year.
Thank
you have my information. I need some answers.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Let's kind of get in the is there anyone else who wants to in the public comment? Yes. I'll come back to you. Yes, sir.
Hello, my name is Jim Haynes. I live at 231 West 5th Street. I want to agree with everything that's been said critically about lollipops. I've been there before it started, when it was Harper's, and things are, the noise level is worse than it was before, and I think it's a difficult situation to decide. When you talk about urban renewal, we're encouraging residents to move down there. We have the lofts where we've said we want people to come down to downtown Winston, but then you've also got the Harpers or Lollipops or whatever who've been there before. It's It's a complex problem, but it is a problem. And if you decide with urban renewal you do encourage people to move downtown, then you have to be sensitive to the fact of what they're going to be living and having to live with. And the noise level goes on and on till almost daylight. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Haynes. All right, I'm going to close the public comment period, and Councilmember Montgomery asked to be recognized.
Yeah, just wanted to make a comment to Mr. Suggs' points that he made. I do not disagree with anything that Mr. Suggs commented today. I believe that he was 100% correct on the record in terms of the conditions in which he currently lives in. As of Tuesday of last week, went to the property to see for myself and saw exactly what it was. Now, I was assured on last week when I came back in terms of the information reference to this that Mr. Suggs would have been contacted and followed up with on last week. And clearly he's stating today that that did not happen. And so for me, I need to know exactly what didn't happen in terms of the follow-up that was supposed to take place from the staff side of that. And I did say to him that I would also follow up with him on last week with that, but did not get anything from staff back on that. And so need to understand what happened in that. But tonight we've heard two things that concern me very much in reference to inspections, in terms of properties in which city staff have gone out and inspected the properties and failure to follow up. In particular, in Mr. Suggs' property, I witnessed for myself where inspections, and I've said this to one of the assistant city attorneys, where inspections came out to the property, and with my own eyes, I saw additional items that were not cited on that property. And we need to understand why that's not happening, because we're entrusting the public good in individuals to go out and do the work, but that's not happening. We need to ask the question and understand why that's not happening, and then take the proper protocol to make sure that that doesn't happen in the future, because we entrust that that's taking place. And I know I personally witnessed for myself in following and seeing that an inspector came out to the property and things that were clearly visible were not cited in that property. And Mrs. Suggs has had a time and a dilemma with this property going on since January of this year when they came out to that property when he first had interactions with that. So the concerns that I heard tonight, I take very seriously, and I hope that Mr. City Manager and Attorney, I hope that we respond swiftly in reference to these actions today.
Thank you. Councilmember Bessie.
Yeah, particularly since a couple of reasonable cases have been raised regarding private landlord-tenant issues, conditions. I wonder if our city attorney would just briefly explain what kinds of processes are involved in pursuing that kind of problem on behalf of a tenant that has reported those problems to the city.
Ms. Carmen.
Good evening. Sure. As you all know, we do have a minimum housing code, and under the minimum housing code, a tenant can report conditions that they believe to be hazardous or unsafe to our community and business development department, our housing conservation administrator in particular, and then an inspector will come out to inspect that property to determine if it's in compliance with the housing code. And if it's not in compliance with the housing code, then a notice of hearing will be issued to the landowner and afford that landowner an opportunity to have a hearing. And after that hearing, if it is found to be, the property is found to be unfit for human habitation, an order is sent to that particular landowner, giving that landowner an opportunity to repair the unfit conditions and bring the property into compliance. And if the property is not brought into compliance, depending upon the condition, it may come before the council for an order to demolish, order to repair, or we may go to court to get an order of abatement. Is that what you were asking for?
Thank you. It's a complicated process, multiple steps involved. It's not a quick fix most frequently, but it's a route that can be pursued, particularly when there are severe problems involved.
Good. Councilmember Clark.
Two items. First off, in both instances tonight, the issue of mold came up. I'd be curious as what if the minimum standards or whatever address mold. So, I mean, you don't have to answer a lot, but it'd be curious to see exactly what it says in that. Secondly, unrelated, there have been several articles lately about food deserts. I was wondering if the staff could research and see if there's an official definition for a food desert. Some folks have asked for me to work with them on some issues, and I want to first off understand if there is a government definition or generally accepted definition of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion second to adjourn. All in favor of the motion to adjourn, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, no. We're adjourned.